Hey guys, it's David from Redeemed Reckoning. Wanted to make clarification in today's podcast. At one point, I make a comment about in the Bible it says that we should not seek persecution. We see examples of Paul avoiding persecution, but do not seek persecution is not in there. We can say that we shouldn't due to things we do see in the Bible. We talk about that in the podcast. But ultimately, I was mistaking it for church history, where you have church fathers, early church fathers, telling their congregations, do not seek martyrdom. So, wanted to make that clear, wanted to own up to a mistake that I made in the podcast, and I hope you really enjoy today's podcast.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Who is that?
And the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight on the
Good for you.
infantry watch, where so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rang.
Okay.
Been waiting to bust that out all day.
Amen.
All right. Who are we, bro?
Amen.
Who are we?
We are Redeemed Reckoning.
Redeemed Reckoning.
And that very patriotic.
Very, especially
Opening.
for the topic of today.
Yes. And I've been waiting to put that
Yeah.
sticker on just for this show.
That was today. You went today to vote?
Yeah. It was out of convenience.
It's right here, right? Did you go right here at the Union
No,
Station?
man, I'm in a free county.
You're in Oh, that's right. This is Pender.
Yeah. Don't be telling everybody where we at, man. We don't gonna get shooters and
I
things.
forgot about that. I voted early.
Being
the
this
other day.
patriotic,
I voted
man.
this first day. That way we could.
because he's a communist, and he's gonna vote multiple times.
Hey, vote often, vote early, and vote often. That's the.
He's got a couple ancestors that have just been
That are
sitting
gonna
there.
pop
The
up.
names have just been hanging around.
You know, I've often wondered if, because they still send me stuff from Florida. I wondered if I could go down there if my name would still be on the list.
Do you see the thing about Jimmy Carter, like voting, casting his early vote, and he's just in his wheelchair or whatever, and he's he legitimately
Yeah.
looks dead.
Yeah,
And-
he filled that out. He filled that out.
Yeah. But I've often wondered if, if I tried to go back to vote a second time, if they would allow me. If I went to a different polling place.
Yeah, but don't do it.
Of course not.
We're Americans. We're not
I
Democrats.
would never do that. That's fraud. So
It's one thing to pick about it. It's one thing to seriously consider it.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So
me.
what's the topic today, there, brother?
So the topic is USA.
That's right.
USA.
Build that wall.
USA.
Build that wall.
Fight.
Fight.
So no, last time we did a podcast, the new setup because of the three guys, like when it's just two of us, I could just stare.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of like,
Yeah, that's why we put you in the middle.
Let's invite our brother here.
Well,
I
you
mean,
just-
and I invite him. He's already here. Let's
Yeah.
Introduce him.
would you please come to a podcast with us, please? So last time I had made a comment that it wasn't necessarily a sin to vote for anybody or not to vote, and was trying to be consistent in my in my legit logical thinking of that thing. Why would it be a demo? And the thought process was, if it's a sin to vote for Democrats, just simply looking at the party platform, why wouldn't it not be a sin to vote for Republican? And just for good measure, saying that if your conscience would not allow you to vote, period, because of that very same premise, would it be a sin not to vote? And because I'm a pastor, I carry that out to not just, sinner. No, if you're living in open sin, then that means you're not allowed to take communion.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's things that I think about, and instead of just, slapping the title center on everybody I disagree with,
Well, last time, if you remember, by the way, this is John. What's your?
We
don't give
there
last
yet.
names,
We
right?
ain't there yet. We ain't there yet. So he's so eager, fellas. He's so eager.
Well, I just want to make sure
He's an
people
eager
know.
beaver. So and then after that podcast, I brought it up to John. John's our guest, and he is a good friend of mine. And first time meeting Pastor Curry, but I brought that up to him, and he's like, "No, you're an idiot." And
Is that the word you used?
Probably exact words.
and then when I explained it to him, he was like, "I hate you. Quit trying to be consistent."
Well, John, when I went into that podcast thinking, how can you possibly vote Democrat with that platform that they have?
Yeah.
But then he brought up something. Would we deny communion to someone who did? Man, I got thinking that's different.
Because that's serious.
That was one of the things that he had mentioned, and I was like, well, one, it's good to hear that the communion table would be protected.
Yeah.
In that way in the church. And so that would be it would have to be something where the church could officially say, this is sin.
Right.
We're going to call it that.
Yeah.
And if you do this, then you need to repent. If that's what the ruling was.
Right.
So, but leaving it there, which we did not go any further into that really. We did not want to lead people into thinking that it was just like, it doesn't matter who you vote for. We didn't want to just leave it as, it doesn't matter. Whatever you feel like doing is okay with God. And so
Exactly. That's
we
a
did
good
want to
point.
dive a little bit deeper or a lot deeper into that topic. So just for the record, I took my hat off earlier because I was picking on these boys. But
There you go.
I am
You see his hat?
a patriotic. Oh yeah, he gives me a fit over the hat.
Give him a fit because he hasn't given me one yet.
I am a very patriotic American who loves this nation, and very conservative. Extremely conservative. To the other point to where I'm talking to some people who claim to be conservative, like, no, you're an extremist. So, I'm voting for. I voted a straight Republican ticket.
I did too today.
I did not
Or
vote
last week.
for a single Democrat, and there's reasons for that, biblical reasons for that. And I think that's probably something to handle. The reason I think it's everybody I brought that up to kind of had this gut reaction of being like, "Nah, man, that ain't right."
What brought what up to? What do you mean?
It's not a sin to vote for
Oh, okay.
one party or another party. Where I was trying to level the playing field, so to speak, and almost everybody I spoke to kind of had a gut reaction to, no, that's, and we even got,
Like saying voting straight Republican is maybe not a good idea?
no,
or-
when I said that voting for a Democrat isn't a sin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would love to have talk to someone who says they're a Christian and they said they have absolutely no problem voting that. And I think that's where we're going today, right?
Yeah.
On why are you voting Democrat? Okay, and I think we need to kind of clarify their platform for the last, since I think Obama's first term, 2008. John, how long were you even voting then?
No, I wasn't
I'm
voting.
only 25.
You were voting there, right, or no?
Yeah.
Abortion.
I
That
was
is on their
12, but I was
platform.
voting.
Yeah. The abortion is on the platform. Before they were kind of skirted. It's full on now.
Yeah.
And I believe it's gone to the point now at any time, right? Any stage up to 9 months.
I don't know if that's an official thing,
what? We
but
should
I
look
haven't
at that.
ever heard anybody. If you try to
Right.
put any restrictions on abortion,
Yeah.
it automatically becomes, well, you just want women to die.
Yeah, exactly.
I was even going to say, like, just I know it's like broadcasted in previous elections that this is one of the stances that we're going to take on this issue
Yeah.
for the Democratic Party. But I mean, it could be also because I'm a full adult now. But the amount of pushing that is on that one issue is like
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it's just
And-
I've got letters in
exactly.
the mail, and it's not even vote for me because of this policy
Mhm.
or this or this. It's like, no, they're not letting us have abortions.
It's
it's
crazy.
Like it's almost like the single point that it's all fixed upon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the abortion thing, and I'm sure that's what we'll get to in a minute. And then there's the transgender thing,
Mhm.
the whole LGBTQ plus 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 plus,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that's their platform.
And we have a buddy, a mutual friend, I won't mention his name, who's like, I'm not voting, period.
Well, he's not
And-
voting
and-
for that person. He might vote on other things, right?
I don't know. I mean, if you can't,
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you're against the platform, I don't see how you can vote for anybody.
Yeah, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
And to be fair, this time around,
Yeah.
the Republicans have gone weak on the abortion.
And
Yep.
so
Yep.
I'm
Well,
trying
I
to
mean-
figure out if I
Da-
want to throw
David-
this in there yet. So for the longest time in our county, our sheriff was a good sheriff, but he was a registered Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be the only Democrat that won anything in our county.
Where do you live?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at that and saying there's a place where you can vote for a Democrat, right?
course.
And not be
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because there again he's not making policy on abortion,
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
and he was a solid law enforcement guy. I mean he was not, and a lot of people were like, "Wow, he just does it because." Whatever reason, but try to figure out a reason to
Right.
around it. But the reality was that's what it. I mean, he had a D beside his name, and I mean, I can't remember if I voted for him or not. I could easily see me just not voting for him out of principle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just be like, no, I ain't gonna do it.
That's one of the good thing where I'm at. The sheriff he's Republican.
The guy who's sheriff now is,
Oh,
but
okay.
this was a couple. He was sheriff for a long time though.
That's a good point, Pastor David. That at that level, does it matter what platform they're with? I mean, do they make what does a sheriff do? Like, for instance, I mean, would he make decisions based on would he push abortion? No.
Well,
don't think so,
mean,
right?
I think you could seriously question enforcement of law issues.
Mm.
Like if the government came into your county and tried to do something unconstitutional,
Mhm.
and maybe I'm wrong in this, but y'all correct me if you think I am. I think a Democratic sheriff would be less likely to stop that than a Republican sheriff.
Ah, yeah.
I mean, I may be
based
wrong,
on the trends. Yeah.
but I mean that's if BLM came to your county,
Mm-hmm.
how's your sheriff going to react?
Trying to tear up things.
Yeah, how's your sheriff going to
that's a good
react?
point too.
So, I mean, even in those situations, there again, the guy I'm talking about, though, I think he would have stopped BLM if they had came to our county.
Mm.
I think he would have said, "No, this ain't happening here. You're not destroying."
Yeah, and that's important because the voting is it is more than abortion.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot more issues to
Well,
consider.
illegal immigration, right? One of the issues I brought up with our buddy who's not voting, I was like, there's more than just abortion, although that's a very important issue.
Mhm.
But the immigration, how many people are dying because the borders are open? How many people are being kidnapped, put into sex slavery, put into other forms of slavery?
Yeah. So all of those issues have biblical premises. Like it's not just something that that's another issue. Use your discernment.
Yeah,
Right.
and I would go as far. A lot of people go, "Well, it's not like taxes," and I'm going, "Well, I think taxes have a biblical."
Yeah.
I mean, the reason was it the prophet Samuel that warned against the king?
Yeah.
And one of his arguments was he's gonna tax you over 10%.
And he's going to take your men to go and to be in his army.
Uh-huh.
And so exactly.
So I think we even have now can you make that a hard and fast rule? I don't know, but you can at least look at the principle there and say the Bible does speak to it, even if it's not a direct. It's not like it's not like don't lie, don't steal, but we see an example where it's like, hey, the king's going to tax you, and that's not good for you. Mm-hmm. Or that the amount of tax. There again, why 10%? Why did he bring up 10%? Because you gave 10% to God. So now you're giving more than what you give to God to the king.
Yep.
That was kind of the point behind that.
So, John, I know Pastor David, we've talked kind of about this, but you're the people that you hang out with. Do you hang out with a lot of people that would vote Democrat?
Well, while I was in college, for sure.
Okay, so
I had
Christians.
No. Well,
Okay.
yeah, no. I would have. That's a whole nother story to go down. But in college, I was unregenerate.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Mount Olive. So I was unregenerate while I was in college, and then after got converted by the grace of God.
But I don't see that as a
So-
big liberal bastion of.
Well, it is.
Well, Mount Olive is not
we
conservative.
can
Oh, really?
that there's a lot to unpack with that, and I try to tell people that whenever they're like, "Oh, you went to UMO, that's a Free Will Baptist school, blah blah, all this stuff," and I'm like, "Okay,
Oh, it is.
like, do we have an hour to talk? Do we have 30 minutes? What do you want me to
Well,
say?"
the reason I brought that up is the people that you hang out with. Before we started the podcast, I told you guys, I said I would love to have someone who claims to be who is a Christian. Let's just say that if that's what they are, if that's they're claiming to be, but they insist on voting Democrat. What's the reasoning behind it? Have you ever talked to anybody like that?
At this moment, no.
Yeah.
Well, there are some that I know about, let's say, but not anyone that I'm like conversing to really on any form. Like, for example, my mom has told me one of her friends she goes to church and she's going to be voting for the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
and
I've
I'm
got
like,
friends like that too.
so no, it's not somebody that I personally know, but I mean, even me and my wife have talked about it, and we're coming to the same conclusion. Like, if you're born again and you believe the words of Scripture, you believe the teachings of Christ, all of those things, how can you reach that conclusion?
Would you have anybody in your church you think would vote Democrat or no?
It would be. It's hard to say. I think I know where a lot of the leaders are. In terms of what they seem to be leaning towards. There's been no like official or public statement or anything like that.
Yeah.
I noticed today, and we talked about that too. We didn't think of anybody in our church who we would think would vote that way. But I noticed because as a church, what is it, 501c, you're not supposed to be able to, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to. What's the exact wording?
I don't know the exact wording, but it boils down to I'm not supposed to endorse anybody.
Okay. So
Or the church isn't supposed to make a public thing that says we're endorsing this candidate or that
Gotcha.
candidate.
So I saw a church today in the country over there where I live. I mean, there's no houses around it, just the church. But on their property, across the street, they had Harris Waltz. I guess that's how they got away from it. 'Cause it wasn't anybody else's. They put it across the street
Yeah.
to let people know, hey, this is how we think you should vote, I guess. But, and Pastor David, you said when we talked on the phone about this podcast, you said, and maybe you can explain a little bit more, it really comes down to why are you voting that way? Is that right?
Yeah. I would definitely say your motivations in voting can be sinful or not sinful. Like I said, if you vote for your county sheriff and you know this guy or he has a proven record of being a solid constitutional following sheriff, vote for him. But if you're over there talking about I believe we ought to have the right to kill babies. And I don't want anybody taking my right to commit murder
They would never put it that
at
way.
my
though.
convenience.
They would never put it that way. As
But
a
but
Christian.
that's
Right, of
what
course,
it is.
Of course.
And
of course.
those are two entirely different things.
So
those
you're
are two entirely different things.
So you're saying if that's why they're voting, then we have a problem as Christians.
Yes.
Yep.
Now to complicate it a little bit, because I don't want to straw man this thing. You got guys like Russell Moore, David French, those type of guys.
Who are they?
Pagans who claim to be Christians.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Do you know?
No, I was
Okay.
gonna.
This guy knows everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to explain.
I gotta catch up
constantly. Hey, who are these people?
So these are guys who actually have a platform in Christian circles, and who have said they're basically Democrats, and they would say, well, if we're going to be pro-life, we need to be pro-life womb to tomb. Now, y'all have probably heard that before, I imagine.
Of course.
And so they would say womb to tomb. J.D. Greer's made that comment, I believe, in the past.
That's anti-abortion, isn't it? That.
Well, what they're saying is that you can't be anti-abortion without being pro-welfare.
Huh?
Oh.
Because you have to take care of them once they are alive.
Right.
And so you have to be pro-welfare. And so they see welfare as Christian.
Okay,
Now,
so they're saying then if we're going to say, hey, let me see if I'm getting this right. In other words, a poor lady gets pregnant. She's not married. And for her to have that baby, so they're saying she should maybe abort that baby because she can't afford that baby. But if she is going to have the baby, then we have to take care of it. Is that what they're saying?
I don't know. I don't
okay.
know. I'm sure there are some who would say that. I think stereotypically they just throw out that little tagline because it's catchy, and they hope that you just interpret it in a way that's favorable. But they are definitely saying that that it is every bit as unbiblical to reject welfare as it is to reject. Excuse me. Welfare is just as much of a biblical issue as abortion.
Right.
They would hold those two equal.
Wow.
Now, the Bible is anti-welfare, so I don't know how they get there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it tells us to take care of the poor. In fact, it tells the church to take care of the church, and then you can take some verses and maybe take it outside of the church. But most of the verses that they use for welfare are actually Bible verses where the Scripture's telling us to take care of each other as Christians.
Which verses do you think they're referring to? The widows, maybe in 1 Timothy?
Yeah, widows.
Acts 6.
Take care. The
Which that would even be a special category. I mean, there's just even more nuance there with widows that don't have children to take care of them.
Yeah. I mean,
stuff like
they
that.
had qualifications. I mean, it wasn't just because you were a widow.
Sure was.
Yeah.
But there, I mean, taking care of the least of these.
Of course.
Those type of verses. They really do. They really do hold those in the same. Now, there again, I would say that it's up to the church to support the church. If somebody in our church needs financial assistance, one of the great things about the church is we can do that, and we can also help them get on the right track so they don't continuously need
That's right.
financial
That's
assistance.
right.
Yeah.
Where the government wants you to do that because as long as you have your hand out, they have a hook in you,
Yes.
and they can kind of snatch you around wherever they want.
You could strawman it from both sides. Paul's saying, like, don't be a burden to other people. The man who doesn't work doesn't eat. Stuff like that. So you could take both sides and be like, we're not going to help them at all, or we're going to bend over completely and let them take advantage of us.
Yeah, and there again, I think the proper biblical grounds is that the church helps, starting with those in the church.
Of course.
And then if it's capable, it branches out.
when you saw Paul, I wanted to say Peter so bad I had to stop. Paul was running around saying, "Hey, I'm collecting money for Jerusalem." Why? Because Jerusalem was being persecuted so badly that a lot of their people were broke and they couldn't work because they were Christians. And so those Christians made a legitimate sacrifice to be Christians, and they were poor because they couldn't work. And Paul was taking up money to give to the church for that very reason. So that does not necessarily mean welfare.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a problem with the government having a safety net, and I don't know many people that do. But when it's just it becomes a safety net to a safety blanket, you know, and there's virtually no stopping it. And listen, this goes far beyond food stamps and that type of thing. This goes to our farmers.
Yeah.
Who get lots of money from the government.
Oh,
I mean,
money not to plant certain crops.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
crazy.
I worked for a company making steam, and we put a generator in our plant so that we could get money for, and that the whole that whole industry of power is welfare. And so one thing that I would point out is it's corporate welfare as well as individual welfare that I would want to see come to an end. And I get that through biblical principles.
Right.
So, I mean, and that's just one example. I mean, and that's a more nuanced example. That's a more and one that the someone who was a Democrat would use to say, well, this is why I vote Democrat.
Yeah.
So, but when they vote for that, though, I still have a hard time someone voting for that because of the radical platform that is the Democrat Party now.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the
One-
big. Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that David had brought up when we talked about it briefly was there could be ignorance coming into play. Perhaps some
You
people
think
don't
so
know.
nowadays
No,
with all
like,
the
and
bombardment that they're
that-
having?
It's hard to
That's the
imagine.
point that I was going to say is it would be very hard to imagine that with literally everything that comes into my mailbox is, oh, here's Mark Robinson. Here's what he said about abortion. And then David looks at me and goes, I wish the Republicans were as conservative as the Democrats make them out to be.
Yes.
But part of that is true. It's funny, but it's true. And so I would even say even if it was an ignorance, to a degree, you could still categorize it as sin. I mean, there are, I think it's in Deuteronomy in the Old Testament where it talks about sinning and you don't know, an unknown sin.
Let me play devil's advocate.
It's still sin.
You grow up in a culture here in America that you're a black person who grew up in an urban environment. You go to a Baptist church that promotes this stuff, promotes the Democratic.
Okay.
We all know, and it's not a secret that black churches are not afraid to talk politics.
Yeah.
I mean, politicians use it all the time by going into the church and you know, even on Sunday mornings, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Didn't Kamala
and there again, I want to clarify too.
too.
This is not all black churches. This is not.
Of course.
I do want to be careful because I don't want to just paint with a broad brush and be insulting.
78% of blacks vote Democrat, though.
So you grow up in that. You're not being told that abortion is a sin. You're not being told abortion is a sin. You're not being preached that what is happening is the murder of a child inside of the womb. You may not even realize that what a infant looks like at 5-6 weeks in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
You may think it looks like a blob of cells.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're constantly being told. It's
Right.
just a blob of cells, but it looks like a baby, a little tiny
Yeah, yeah.
grain of rice baby, but it looks like a baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you may just be complete. And there again, because I don't want to just attack people because they think different than I do.
Mhm.
I can see that being a realistic example of somebody being ignorant.
Well, I would say,
Mm.
just to that point, I'll bring up even a personal example. I think, and again, in the Old Testament, when a sin becomes known, let's just say in this case, it would be a sin. You are to repent of that, to do the sacrifice.
Mhm.
So in a similar situation, I was very ignorant of IVF. Recently, I
Yeah, that's a good
had
example.
just never talked about it. I didn't really know, and I was like, "Oh, some people that struggle with fertility, they do IVF, and it helps." And I was like, "Sure." I didn't know, so I think it was Al Mohler was talking about IVF and how it's sin. You
Al
can't
Mohler
support
said that?
because of how IVF is done. They take I don't know the particulars, but he essentially there would be a couple of eggs or
Right, okay.
sperm taken, and whichever was the most viable would be something like that,
Yeah.
Right.
to that effect, which would be the same thing as abortion. It's just
Mm-hmm.
you're just less cells at that point, which isn't any more excusable. If I had voted for IVF in the past and then just now, let's just say in some scenario I could have voted to support it, let's say.
Yeah.
And then now I just figured that out. I believe, like, as a Christian, I would have to repent of that sin,
Yeah.
even though it was in ignorance.
And there again, the Republicans endorse and support IVF.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So there's that argument that how and let's move in this direction, because I think we've done a pretty good job of saying, okay, these things are sinful, and that's why we can't vote for it. We also have made a case that the Republicans have a lot of the same things on their platform, just to a lesser extent.
Yeah.
How do we justify saying that we're going to vote for one and not the other, rather than just pulling out of the voting system altogether?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've voted now. My first time I voted was in 1980 for Ronald Reagan. And it's
He's
all,
old. You think I'm old?
You
I
are
I
old.
was 18 years old.
You're both old to me.
So
It's relative.
Look at the baby over there. He's just a baby. Why we even got a baby up here? What's he know?
how old are you?
25.
Gosh, my youngest is going on 35.
Oh
so
my
anyway.
goodness.
Anyway, I was always told if it's you pick the lesser of two evils. That's what, and I think a lot of Christians think that way.
Uh-huh.
But is that correct thinking?
Is that a biblical thought process?
I mean, to vote, that's a good point, because nowadays, especially this cycle, the
Yeah.
Republicans have on abortion.
Yeah.
They have gone, well, at least Trump has, further to the left on abortion, and
Yeah.
because he knows that's a bit, for whatever reason, it has now become a big deal, and he is way down
Well-
the polls with women.
There is a this particular thing is there are a lot of guys who are liberal people who have seen the chaos of the Democrat Party. They're still liberal, but they see that as that's not as bad. So Trump is trying to build this really big tent party. So he can't draw the hard lines like he did the first time.
Right.
First time he was after the Christians. Now he's after basically all the middle people.
Yeah.
And that's keeping him. And there again, Donald Trump's not a Christian,
No.
and he is a very pragmatic businessman, and so he's running this campaign very pragmatically in that sense. So that I think that kind of goes to what you were talking about right there, where now, to be fair, last time he governed more to the right than how he than how he ran. So my hope is that we'll see that again. That he will govern more to the right than what he's running.
He's always been fuzzy on abortion, though, even from the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and it's obviously no question about homosexuality and all of those things.
yeah. He's
go
like,
along
where's
with
my
it.
where's my
Yeah.
gay Republicans at?
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
because he had some in his cabinet.
Yeah.
Well, at least surrounding himself.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was just gonna say then it would, the way biblically I guess to look at this would be you kind of have three options. Even if we just were to talk about the presidential candidate, you could vote. Well, I guess four technically. You could write in one. You could vote for Trump. Another option you could go for Harris, or you could not vote at all.
Yeah.
And so, as Christians, the question would be, well, what? Obviously, in every situation, what would glorify God the most?
Yeah.
And we bought it up. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just one of the points I was listening to somebody talk about this, and in our current government, God has, through his providence, ordained that we would have the ability to vote. And through that vote, you can determine in some degree, some shape or form, the outcome of the country. And so to neglect that right that you've been given to affect generations after you as well would seem to me to maybe it's permissible, maybe, but I just think it's completely negligent, and in that sense, it
To
could
do what?
to not vote.
Oh, okay.
You're just neglecting the authority that you've been given, even no matter how small it is. It can make a difference, and to not exercise that or to do that, I think is probably worse than voting.
And we kind of brought it up last time, where Peter said, Paul, pray for your. What was it, Peter, I believe it was, who pray for those in authority over you so that you can live godly and peaceful lives.
Mhm.
So, and we decided that, well, I don't know if that applies to elections, but it kind of could, because
One side
the
will
authorities-
give us a more peaceful life than the other.
Exactly. And if not, then,
Yeah.
the other side, if the Democrats had their way, they'd shut this church down. Those at the upper echelons, because we're not pro
The church.
LGBTQ and all that.
So this goes into my broader political theory is that the post-war consensus, as far
I
as
knew you were going to go there.
why the post-war consensus that says that strong beliefs create tyrants,
Post World War II, you're talking about?
yes,
Okay.
leads us to a place to where we have these very weak tolerance. Tolerance of what? You can't be tolerant of everything. It's impossible.
Yeah.
If I am, if I'm tolerant of children, then I'm not tolerant of pedophiles,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? I mean, so you can't be it's impossible. But
Yeah.
we lift these weak things up to prevent tyrants from taking over. The problem is, what happens then is you're not left with anything strong enough to fight back the evil, because you've taken away the strong drives, nationalism, religion, patriarchy. The whole idea of patriarchy is that there's somebody who is there to lead and protect.
Right.
And you make it to where you take the protector away and the leader away. What is that going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to have a bunch of lost people who are weak and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so that's what the post-war consensus did. And Trump, if he's aware of it or not, strong borders, he's not. Yeah, he's
very
a nationalist. Yeah, those type of things are strong beliefs, and I would love to see him become a Christian. But with that being said, you have to have these stronger things to fight off the weak things. Well, the strongest thing in America is the church. Now, some people, how do you
Where in
figure
the
that?
world?
You know,
The real
because
church.
because even though we may be little in numbers, we have the power of Christ behind us. It's what guides us and empowers us. And that's the strongest thing. I mean, there is nothing else stronger than Christ. And so they recognize that. A lot of churches don't recognize that, but the enemy does. The politicians who are atheist and all that, you know, they realize that.
Yeah.
And they want nothing more than to get rid of the church. If you've ever heard Pastors for Sale, if you ever read that book, I think that's the name of it.
No.
Um,
yeah, you've mentioned it to me before.
Yeah. I mean, it talks about how they were unable to defeat the church through one method. So what they decided to do was start pouring money into the church so that they could influence the church.
Right.
And that was more effective.
Yep. I haven't read it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean it's insane, and so that's currently their tactic is to buy off the church, and
To therefore influence the church.
yeah, and so, but they realize that the thing that stands between them and domination is the church. And so if you had a candidate who was really biblically minded, patriotic, you know, they tried to kill him.
Oh yeah.
And they did that with Trump, and he's not nearly the man that I want to be in office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's got tons of things that I wish weren't true, or and so but if God brings revival to this nation and puts it back on a course that brings him glory, it in leadership anyway, it's going to take strong beliefs led by strong men.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys mentioned it before, and you just mentioned it again. How should Christians then approach the whole immigration thing, the border thing? Didn't
Shut them
Jesus
borders
say?
down, son.
Didn't Jesus say, let them all come in and help? We got to help them.
I don't mean to make this scatterbrained, but did we ever answer how we can? We brought up vote for Harris, vote for Trump, or not vote.
Mm-hmm.
Did we ever answer really other than choosing the lesser of the evils?
Mm-hmm.
How a Christian can vote one way and not the other? I think that's a question that people are going to want answered.
I don't think there's going to be any direct, clear answer on that. Like the lesser of two evils thing, it's not. Unfortunately, I would say it's not really a biblical stance. And you had said it earlier, like God's not going to put you in a position where you have to sin. Let's say, and that
leads me back to why I don't think voting for anybody is necessarily a sin. The motivation for voting for somebody can be a sin. If I think Trump's going to be the savior of this nation and not Christ, then I'm voting for Trump in sin.
Yeah, and that's another thing to bring up. How you were saying, like, if this country's going to have revival, it's going to be strong men. Part of that is the reason why we have these options is because of where the men are at in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had solid male headship in every family across the country, we would have better choices than Trump and Harris. Like that just wouldn't happen. So part of it is you're not even going to get the revival from any election. You're going to get revival from people turning to Christ. Yeah.
Yeah. Ground up, not top down. I'm going to throw out a theory, and y'all correct me if you disagree or I'm wrong. God has given us judgment. But we actually, in this rare, talking about the history of the world, we as a people actually have a opportunity to choose what judgment we want. Donald Trump or Kamala Harris.
Are you talking about when he was talking to David?
Yeah,
Gave him
no.
some choices.
That's actually a good example. I weren't even thinking like
And
that.
that's at the end of David's life. What are you talking about? When
But-
you say judgment, what are you saying?
Donald Trump is judgment on this nation.
Okay.
Kamala Harris is a greater judgment on this nation. We have the opportunity to actually hold back a certain amount of judgment.
Define judgment then for when you say Donald Trump is a judgment on this nation.
Donald Trump is he is not going to be a leader that glorifies God.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to do things that are going to cause judgment from God
Mm-hmm.
because the people who live in this nation are not people of God.
All right.
And so he's given us this option because there are Christians in this nation. And so there is a greater judgment and a lesser judgment. Which one are we going to pick?
So, well, then you go right back to the lesser of two evils.
Well, the reason I would change that a little bit is lesser of two evils is more like I just need to pick what's in front of me. I want to. It's kind of vague,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to draw it to a more biblical principle of that God is judging our nation. We are in judgment.
So
Now.
then you don't vote then, if that's what you're thinking.
Well, okay, so
But then if Harris wins, you voted for her.
yeah,
Exactly.
and that's what I'm saying.
Exactly. So you're
As a
damned
Christian,
if you do, damned if you don't.
As a Christian, you have the ability, but not all judgments the same.
Mm-hmm.
Not all judgments the same. A famine is not the same as a dip in the stock market.
Right. Okay.
It's not the same judgment.
Or,
And what I'm saying is, we have an opportunity to hold back a certain amount of judgment that will allow for the church to operate more freely.
Mm-hmm.
He's still a sinful human being. He's still judgment onto our nation. But there, with this, you see this kind of this ability for us to be able to say it's either lesser judgment or
Right.
greater judgment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And me and him have had this discussion before. I'm of the opinion that the church being freer to do what the church is supposed to do without persecution, I think the church flourishes more when there's persecution. Therefore, let the judgment come.
I've come to disagree with that statement. I used to think
know
that
you have.
same
well,
way.
I could look at Acts and how everything worked.
Well, listen, the church flourished and then it was persecuted.
Mm-hmm. And then
It wasn't the other way around.
And then it spread out.
It wasn't the other way around.
But then it spread out.
Yeah.
And they
They
flourished.
fled persecution, they flourished, and then there was more persecution.
And then they flourished again.
So what my point is, the church actually flourishes, which brings up on it persecution,
Well,
and it continues to flourish within that persecution.
exactly. Well, I think also too though, persecution is
If we're asking for persecution while we're not flourishing, we would be killed off
well, no, because the church would never go away. We know that.
worldwide, not here in America.
Right. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is, it's persecution has a winnowing effect, as in it weeds out the non-believers, and therefore you have a more holy church because you have real believers. It's like winnowing out. If there's persecution, the people who claim to be believers, are they going to stick around?
So should we pray for persecution?
Well,
I don't think so, because the Bible tells us to avoid persecution when it's possible.
where does it say that?
You know I suck at this
Well,
part
listen,
of things.
Peter said you expect persecution.
Expect persecution. He also said, don't become a martyr for martyrdom's sake.
Where's that?
I'm trying to remember. I want to say in Acts, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, we know Paul tried to avoid it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
When-
there
when-
again,
when he
Paul-
had a-
Paul
I mean,
gives
I
an
don't think
example.
the goal would be to go after
Yeah,
person.
I
I mean,
know.
the
There's a
biblical
scene-
premise is going to be like you're going to suffer
There's
to,
a s-
to be perfected. I mean, even
Yeah.
Christ had to do that.
Right.
There's a scene in the text to where there were people who were actually going out with the express purpose that they would do something to get persecuted. And they were saying, don't do that.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
persecution comes your way.
What he was saying earlier, 1 Timothy chapter 2, where it says, pray that you can live peaceful, quiet lives. Like, the goal shouldn't be persecution. And if we can avoid it, I would
Paul,
say we take that route.
To your point, Paul, when he was getting ready to be killed by the Jews, he said, I'm a Roman.
Yeah.
I want my
Yeah, exactly.
He also got put in a basket at some point, didn't he, and lowered down a wall.
Yep.
You know, I mean, so there are places.
But when there is persecution, it helps. It helps.
But what I'm saying is, I don't think we ought to be begging for it.
No. Well, yeah, we don't see that. I don't believe that way either. But when it comes, and it's kind of circular here where we're at. Do we vote then for that we don't have the persecution? I think that's your point, right?
Yeah, I think that we should vote in a way that's going to free us up as much as possible, where we have the opportunity to repent and see the church to be able to work as freely as possible within the society in which God has given us. And if Kamala wins anyway, we do the exact same thing, just with more headache.
Exactly, and
so
stick to our
the
principles.
premise would be you should vote Republican, right? You shouldn't vote Democratic. However, is it going to be sin or not?
Yeah, there's the question.
Yeah,
right?
there again, I would say.
I mean, what's the verse? He who knows what is good and does not do it, to him it is sin.
Yeah, I'd go back to the casting of the vote itself is not sinful. The motivation for the reasoning for casting that vote is or isn't.
Well, does it have to be sinful based on their stance?
Say that. Ask me that again.
Does it have to be necessarily like, so if we were to say, well, voting for Harris is sin because of where they stand on all these issues, but then therefore it also has to be sin voting for Trump because he stands similar on those issues, just to a lesser degree.
Yeah, that's where I'm saying that I would say that we can't say that you're sinning because just because of who you voted for. I believe you can sin either vote.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you can sin voting for Trump or Kamala.
Yeah, you can vote for Trump
I think
because
you can
of
sin,
XYZ. That's sinful.
Yeah, I believe you can vote for a Republican without sinning. I believe that's harder to do as a Democrat, but not impossible.
Right.
So is the country more righteous and more godly under Trump, or is it more godly or righteous under Harris?
Oh, it's
neither.
Trump. Well,
Neither.
more.
Neither.
Not,
No.
Because you got to think. You got to think
is-
about what we're under right now,
Yeah.
right? So if we continue with Harris, it has to get. It would just progress more, let's say, and then with Trump, at least if you looked at it as sanctification, you could
So are
say
you
we
talking
would
about
at
the
least
governing
be
of the
trying.
country or the people of the country?
No, as
Well-
a whole, right?
I would say the
just have a-
governing. If Kamala wins, the governing of the country is going to be governed in a way that brings less glory to God.
The
But
people
the
could continue to
people-
get
the
more and more
people-
godless. I mean, that would just be their personal relationship with Christ at that point. And
Yeah, but we also don't know if the people will get more or less, because I'm seeing now. You're seeing people turn to Christ who you would have been like, what? That person can't become a Christian. Justin Bieber, whatever his name is.
Don't you have his CD?
yeah, but I mean, it is.
The British hippie guy.
Who? Paul McCartney?
No, man,
You're
we
talking
ain't
about
that
the
old.
dude that met with Tucker Carlson and was praying or something.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
Well,
Now, and I don't know where these guys are. I don't know if they're legitimately saved. But what I'm saying is, you see these people. The guy from Transformers,
Shia LaBeouf.
they're looking for spiritual answers to this because of where we are as a nation, and they're looking for spiritual answers. So we have to be there to give it to them. That can happen if we get worse. It can also happen if things get better. If the church continues to take this passive stance,
Yeah.
then it will get worse.
Yeah.
If we don't learn from the last 100 years of the church and start saying, "Hey, we've got to stand up," and that goes beyond handing out tracts.
Yeah. And
We've
voting for whatever.
Yeah, we've got to learn from that, and because people are out there hurting, and they need answers, and we have to be. We're the only people who have answers. We are. Well, we're the only people who have the correct answer. Let me rephrase that. We're the only people with the correct answer.
Yeah.
And so we that could change under Harris or Trump.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying then is it doesn't matter who eventually becomes president. Christ is still king. He's
Christ
on the
is
throne.
king, and our job has not changed.
Exactly.
Our job has not changed.
But
no matter
what you're saying is, and I think I can appreciate this, it becomes easier or harder depending on who becomes the president.
Yeah.
At least
I
from
don't
like
want-
from
I
a
think-
systematic stance.
Yeah, I don't want
the
my, I don't
the
want my-
abortion battle is easier under Trump.
Yes, absolutely,
Right? Okay.
absolutely.
The immigration battle is easier under Trump.
Yeah, I think even IVF would be.
Mm-hmm.
If you start making leeway under abortion, IVF has to be the next thing that falls.
Yeah, and certainly
And that's what I would say. Like from my opinion, all of when you put all of those things together, it seems as if almost as a born again Christian, you almost have an obligation to do that.
Yes, but can somebody?
I would take
listen,
it. I would take it twice. I would take it on both stance. If you're a born again regenerate Christian, it would be hard for me to believe you would vote for Harris. It would also be hard that you could not vote in good conscience.
Okay, now I would also say,
ooh, that is a hard stance.
I would say that the men at this table have thought this out far more than the people in our pews.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And I go back to, do I take communion from someone who hates abortion, but believes that the Democrat Party is for the small man?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's still people out there who believe that way,
All right, of course.
and they hate the fact that abortion is on their party ticket, but they also hate poverty, and they're not biblically savvy enough to say that welfare is an unbiblical system.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I'm thinking of people actually,
Now,
my
I will go to
parents-
your point. It's getting harder and harder and harder to believe that there's somebody in that ignorant camp.
Yeah.
It is.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say you could even maybe you could justify one person's decision and play the ignorance card and say, well, maybe that's less grievous because of how ignorant they are. But if somebody knows all the facts are
Are
out
we
there
talking about
for
voting
them,
for Kamala or Democrats as a whole? Because there again, you also have the Democrat sheriff example.
Well, a lot of people aren't voting. We gotta recognize this too. A lot of people simply will not vote Trump because they hate him and hate his tweets, hate his whatever. So they automatically think, well, I got to vote for them for her because she's not a bad person.
yeah, it's just
And-
he's
and
going to
Chris
build
Dazzard-
he's
and
going to build
that's-
a better and safer country for our children, grandchildren.
And that's another thing. There are people who really do believe that morally he is scum.
Yeah,
that would be
And
the
they really
example
do
that my
believe-
mom's friend would say he's a dictator or all this other things.
And they completely ignore the fact that Joe Biden molested his child in the shower while she was a young teenager.
Yeah,
And all the hair sniffing and Kamala absolutely sleeping her way to the top.
Yeah.
And they ignore all that, and they find the absolute worst thing about Trump, and they see that because that's what's being pushed in front of them all the time.
Well, I'll tell you this, Mike.
Now, to be fair, my perspective is it's a bit silly to get caught up into that. If you're not, if you still believe CNN, I really do have a hard time being having sympathy for you. I really do, but as a pastor, I also have to realize I have to be responsible enough in the training up of my people to realize we're not all at the same spot, and that there are those who are making unwise and dumb decisions, and those who are just straight sinning. And part of my job is guiding them closer to Christ, not taking them from zero to perfection, because I'm not at perfection by no means.
Would your church, how many pastors do you have at the church?
3.
Okay. Would on any given Sunday, especially during this time, would they get up and say, "Well, folks, you need to vote your conscience, or you need to vote what's Christian"?
Well, we might find out this Sunday. Apparently,
they-
he said he was going to speak on voting.
He's going
So
to come out
Oh,
with a flag.
I'll just wait and
That'd be
see about that.
USA.
I know when
USA.
Trump got shot, they were like praying for him in front of the congregation and everything. So
Yeah, well, they would have prayed for Harris too
Yeah.
if she would have got shot, right?
yeah. Oh, I
Maybe. Maybe not.
an imprecatory prayer. I'm just playing.
Maybe should die.
So
That way,
they,
Waltz gets to be president.
yeah, they would never come out and say, "Hey, you got to vote for Trump."
I do not suspect that will be the case, but I'll see.
Huh? Interesting. I would love to have this conversation with you again after that. See how.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they
Like
do.
I would say maybe they do. I just can't 100% say. Another going back to that point that I was saying about like where the state of the country is at now. Let's say if you removed the actual stance of Trump, let's say, or abortion is permissible. Let's say we remove that stance, and you look at where they're going to pull the country. I would say under the Democratic regime, it would pull it to more ungodliness, later abortions, just take the baby outside of the womb and decide then what you want to do with it. And so that would be a further
Erosion.
further progression towards ungodliness.
Yeah.
And whereas voting for a Republican Party, their regime now would actually draw the country, in many cases, closer to honoring God. Now,
Yeah,
it wouldn't
and he would actually
immediately-
have Christians in his cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And that's what I was saying when I was talking about a sanctification process. The fact that it's not going to be perfect. If you look at it
Yeah.
from an individual level,
of course.
Yeah.
of course you want to be further sanctified, and of course you want to stop all sin immediately. But that doesn't happen. So the same may be true for the country. We're not going to get a perfect Christian
Yeah.
president.
Never.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "Yep, we're going to do this, because the Bible says this."
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe if George Washington comes back.
Well, looking back on history, who do you would think would be the most perfect Christian president we've ever had? I mean, Jimmy Carter was a Southern Baptist, bro. Clinton was a Southern Baptist. Did you know that? He was but when he became president.
Yeah,
they
that's what I was saying.
disowned him.
Apparently, Kamala went to like a church or something recently.
This past Sunday.
Yeah,
Did y'all see where somebody yelled out in the crowd, "Christ is King," and
Yeah.
she kicked him out?
Yeah,
No, she
I
didn't
saw
kick
that
him
as-
out. She just said, "You're in the wrong."
No, they were kicked out.
Well, she didn't know, but they came and got her. Yeah, you're right. She was at New Birth
right, she-
Missionary Baptist Church this past Sunday.
New birth. Interesting.
And you know what they're calling it? Souls to the polls. So she's reaching out to church members.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Souls to the
disgusting.
polls.
It's disgusting.
And
She's pandering. She's just trying to get a vote.
The fact that
I
a
would-
church could be manipulated like that is just.
yeah.
yeah. Well, I always wondered, because there's that text that says, even if the elect could be deceived,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, how can the church be deceived? We have the truth. But you look around and it's out there. And we have this tendency of being like, well, because they're not a perfect church. They're not just like us. They're not a real church. But look at Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I have this against you.
Yeah.
I have this against you. Look at the church of Corinth, the way Paul writes to them. But at no point did they just say, you're not an actual church.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so I try to hold that in balance
Mm-hmm.
and say, yeah, Christians can be deceived. Christians can be foolish. Christians can be sinful.
But that's why you have leaders in the church who help, and church discipline is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that to be able to weed out
Yeah.
that type of thing. But then that open up the whole new avenue. To what extent do we have church discipline? To someone who's advocating for abortion? Someone
Well,
who's
if
advocating,
you are sleeping with your father's wife, that's
well,
definitely
of course, yeah, of course,
definitely. No, I would say
Remove the evil person from your midst.
yeah,
I would say if there was somebody in the church who was like, I am pro-abortion,
yeah.
we would say we would have a meeting with them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
If
they
that didn't
would
work-
would have to repent, like for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
That's
But then again, here, this is what I'm talking about. The whole circular thing. We're right back to what if they vote for it? That's what they're voting for.
You're voting for it either way. You can be perfectly fine with abortion and vote Republican.
And I see your point. Why you said you have to be consistent with talking about.
I
both
try
parties.
to be. I try to be. I'm not saying I'm perfect at that, but
I
If
don't
you
think
cut
we're going.
me,
I don't
I'm-
think we're going to come up with answers.
You can
A
be okay
complete
with
answer.
abortion and vote for Trump, but you can also. It would be hard to say, oh yeah, well you can be a Christian against abortion and vote for Harris. There's just there's more than one issue, and I think it's part of it's also just giving approval to the people in office.
Mm-hmm.
Not only those that sin, but those that give approval to them to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and
Is it
and
okay-
we can play an active role in reversing that.
Yeah.
yeah.
And when you do not vote, you are voting for the other party because you can by your vote, at least you're taking away a vote from them. So if you don't vote, are you in the same?
I would
boat?
say, based on my conscience, again, because it would be very. I can't 100% put my foot down and say, you know,
And your
it is
conscience
or
can be
isn't sin.
manipulated.
Yeah.
But
I'm not saying
if I
you
were
are,
if I were to not vote, to me that would be sin. Personally. Now,
Yeah, I tend to-
based on my convictions and just how I see the cards.
I think that according to the scripture, if giving this opportunity to take the lead in something, we are obligated to do it.
yeah,
and that's-
that's similar to
yeah.
yeah.
And so I tend to agree. But there again, trying to be consistent.
It
And if
sucks
you-
that there's
if you
true brothers
genuinely-
in Christ that
If you
see
genuinely
that.
believe and say voting both ways is a sin, it's reasonable to jump to, well, the only non-sinful way of doing this is not voting, because both parties are promoting sin. And that's one of the reasons I just kind of wanted to pull away from the whole sin,
Mm-hmm.
because what I don't want to see is Christians going, you think different to me, you're a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I
You
wouldn't
know.
want to advocate that.
And
either.
I see that in this particular topic. I see that in this particular topic.
Mm.
And so
Absolutely.
I want to root out, and that's why I fall, your motivations can be sinful, but when you take that pen and you fill in that little bubble, is that act itself as sinful?
Mhm.
I don't believe it is.
Yeah.
I do believe your motivation is sinful.
Oh, this just occurred to me. Is this one of those things? What is it? Romans 14, I believe, where he talks about eating food offered to
The
idols.
weaker brother.
And yeah, is it? And he say, eat the food offered to idols. Just don't broadcast it
Yeah.
because of your weaker brother. Would that?
Well, if that's the case, we're sinning now because we're broadcasting.
Yes.
Everybody's a sinner. We're all going to hell.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be because we're not going to come up with an answer. to this. We can just give our opinion here, of course.
But I think what we're doing is we're actually trying to handle this very serious
Mm-hmm.
and topic, and even if we don't answer it perfectly, hopefully somebody will hear this and say, I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I do want to do what is most biblical.
And the motivation
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah. And that's what I think. Like people that aren't voting, like born again believers that are like convicted. No, I'm not going to vote.
By the way, there's 30% of evangelicals in this country do not vote.
And the other 30% are voting for Harris.
I would say, you know, I wouldn't come down and say at this point. I wouldn't come down and say no. That's sin. I don't believe it is at this point. It's a little, to me. It's almost like grieving. Like I wish you were in this fight with us to help us.
Yeah.
But to a degree, I understand where you're coming from and your motivation to doing
Yeah.
it. But
And it is one of those things that's like, why can't you see? You're blinded in this area.
Yeah.
Why can't you see?
mm-hmm.
And there's just.
Do you think? I mean, I was telling him last time where I used to live in Ecuador, you had to vote, or you didn't. You weren't able to work or get Social Security or anything. Do you think that would ever be a good thing here to make it where you have to vote?
No, I think the least amount of people voting, the better.
Yeah, that's true. Especially if you don't know what you're voting for.
Yeah,
if
I
you're
really
just
do.
haphazardly voting.
Yeah,
That's the unfortunate state of America is we've got so
Yeah,
many pagans that voting is.
If you don't have any skin in the game, I don't think you should vote. And what I mean by that is,
Paying your taxes.
yeah, I mean, if you're not paying taxes, you don't own land, you're not having kids, you're not, you have no investment into the future. You only live for you
Yeah.
right this moment. Then what you're going to do is you're going to vote for things that are harmful for the future
Yeah.
and not the good.
Well, you'll vote for things that are short-term good but long-term bad.
Well, good for you, not the entire nation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, if I give you $1 million today, but in 6 months from now you're going to have to owe me $20 million,"
Mm-hmm.
I would pass up that $1 million.
Yeah, of course.
Well, not just you. Your kids will owe $20 million. Let's
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
it like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because that would probably be more accurate.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because they're going to come kill me once I don't pay them their money back, and because that's like a mob deal. But that the government's the exact same way. You can't just spend and spend and spend. You can't just give and give and give and give without there being a consequence.
Yeah.
There's always a consequence to your action.
Mm-hmm.
And if your mindset is, well, I don't have to deal with the consequence, that's evil.
Yeah.
That's evil.
exactly. That's self-centered
that's-
narcissism.
That's
Yeah.
where I believe the majority of our nation is right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that was the basically illustrating the whole point of like we're voting, but all of our voters are pagans and ungodly and lovers
Yeah.
of self and greedy and deceived and deceivers. Just all of it.
I want to smoke weed. It needs to be legal. Forget the consequences it has on the
Yeah.
economy and the consequences it has on our children, the consequence it has with being high and driving. Forget all that.
Yeah.
I want to get high.
Yeah.
All right. So I haven't had supper. So as we close here.
Are you hungry?
Yeah.
You're
My
gonna-
wife's got food
you look
waiting
like you're
for me.
going to wither away.
I know.
Um,
All right. Listen. So we're 2 weeks away. If you had to guess, who you think wins?
I'll tell you
Based
the
on what
same
you're
thing
seeing.
I told Mr. Joe the other day. Are you asking me who walks through the door? Or are you asking me who wins the votes?
You think they're going to cheat?
I know they're going to cheat.
Would it be?
I
to
know
the
they're
point-
going to cheat.
And we all know who the
is,
there is.
huh?
We all know who the there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think they're
To the
gonna-
point though where they can win the election, like last time.
The
or no?
deep state.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you had right now as it stands, it points to him winning the electoral votes
yeah.
because he's up in several of the swing states.
He's going to have to win like Ronald Reagan did.
Well, the second time he ran, he won 49 of the 50 states.
That's what I'm saying. Trump's going to have to win to that margin.
You think so? Huh?
Yeah, I mean,
that's
maybe
not going to happen.
Well, I mean, he's going to have to win overwhelming.
And-
And they say it. What is it? I forget the phrasing that they've been using, but it's like
too big to rig.
too big to rig. It has to be too
But
big
he
to rig.
hasn't said that lately because it's so close.
But they're gonna rig.
Yeah, you know.
And
if
so-
you had to guess, who do you think?
I
Do you
don't
pay
know.
attention to it?
I don't pay attention to it
Oh,
enough.
okay.
I mean, like the brief stuff that I've been seeing is he's been up. Trump's been up in the polls.
Yeah,
and
the last couple of weeks.
like it's been just based off of that. It looks good. It looks hopeful. I would say. Yeah.
Did y'all see where he worked at McDonald's for like 50
Yes.
minutes?
Listen.
That was so great.
show
That
you.
was so wonderful. And then
Let's see if people can.
the comments
Can
that
they
the
see
media
that if
made.
I put that up there? Did
No.
you see that?
Oh my goodness.
Did you see it? And
It's
look at
it's Trump holding a McDonald's bag
Send me-
when he got shot.
and not only that, I don't know if you
No,
can
no, no.
zoom
Just
in.
send me the picture, and I'll
right.
edit it into the thing.
But
Put it
it's,
as a thumbnail.
This is when he got shot at,
Yeah.
and notice the smile on the face of the Secret Service people. They put a smile on their faces like they're
That's
grabbing it.
hilarious. Somebody
Oh
is
my
really good
goodness.
with
I'll send that
Photoshop.
to you.
Yeah, but then the media came out and was like,
It was staged.
"Well, yeah,
Of course, it was staged.
he's the presidential candidate. Of course, it's staged." But it's also one of those things where they were so insulting to people who worked at McDonald's, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
y'all were so using their language. You're so privileged." You're so privileged. You have no idea how condescending you're being right now. But anyways,
That was good, guys.
yeah.
We need to have Joe with us more often.
His name's
Joe.
not Joe.
Joe, I mean John. John.
All right,
Joe
Joe.
with us more often. Yeah, Joey. All right, what song?
Yeah, we're
are
just
you
gonna
gonna-
combine it.
Yeah, just
What?
Well, yeah, which one is it gonna be this time?
Put the one we had last time.
wait,
That was a good one, man.
we're gonna have to go out on this. This is Star Spangled Banner
Okay.
by Dan Vosk.
No, the best one is by Boston, man. You need to put that one out there. But anyway, so
Aren't they a bunch of Yankees?
no, yes, they are, absolutely. and liberals. So are you gonna dismiss us?
How do you want me
Yeah,
to dismiss
have we been? Not like you had said did before with Bigfoot revival. What have we been doing?
it? I don't know.
What
At
is
the
it?
end.
You tell me.
Regeneration, redemption. What was this?
Redemption? Redeemed Reckoning.
Redeemed Reckoning, and we
Okay.
thank
Reckoning,
you for
Reckoning
joining
is so good because it has the idea of actual reckoning, as in judgment, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But to the Southerner, it means
Yeah, I reckon.
pondering,
I
thinking.
reckon.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
I didn't
it's
even think about that.
redeemed
Redeemed
reckoning.
Reckoning.
So,
So hopefully our church members will listen to this.
Uh-oh.
And if you can, I don't know if you guys have a website or whatever, you can put it in your. They'll let you. Oh, that's good.